Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. Let's talk about, believe it or not, inflation and some effects that happen with inflation that aren't just prices going up. So I'll introduce this with a little bit of an anecdote. My wife noticed that something was off with her coffee a couple of weeks ago. She told me that it was like coating her tongue. It was leaving a weird taste in her mouth and making her mouth feel weird. She noticed her stomach was hurting, maybe after drinking the coffee, and the coffee creamer wasn't frothing in her milk frother. Now, she takes her coffee very seriously, and she always had me buy this same coffee creamer from the store that was made with nothing but like cream and sugar. It was all dairy. It was just dairy coffee creamer, not of the non-dairy replacement for dairy. It was a dairy coffee creamer, like vanilla, cream, sugar. That's what was in it. And so I always bought that for her, and I kept buying it for her. So after she was noticing this pattern of her coffee getting worse, she's like, is my milk frother broken? She's like, well, I had an inkling. Just had a feeling. So I went and checked the ingredients on the coffee creamer, and sure enough, there was soybean oil in it. They had changed the ingredients of the real cream and sugar Coffee Mate Natural Bliss coffee creamer. It was originally all dairy to add soybean oil into it. Now, why on earth would they have done this? Now, I'll give you Coffee Mate's explanation. Soybean oil was added for its proven performance in enhancing the product's creamy texture and showcasing its natural flavor. Buttermilk and gel and gum were added for texture to help deliver a rich and creamy cup of coffee. So they added some weird ingredients into it to replace the fact that they were taking cream. What's creamier than cream? Riddle me this, folks. My belief is that they did not add soybean oil into this coffee creamer. Now, I should also mention at the same time, they subtly changed the packaging. So it no longer said real cream and sugar. It said made with real cream and sugar, meaning those were some of the ingredients. And indeed, there was cream and milk as some of the ingredients to this, but there was also soybean oil and gel and gum, right? Which is a little bit not what people would think of when they're buying a natural coffee creamer. And so since this, by the way, my wife realizing this was making her stomach hurt because it had soybean oil in it and it was leaving a bad taste. It wasn't frothing like real cream in her little cream frother. Started making her own creamer out of real cream and like real vanilla syrup and things like that. And since then, the coffee's probably better than ever. But it was really annoying that this product just happened to change in a very subtle way. They made no announcements about that. But I believe, contrary to what Coffee Mate may say about this, that it's actually a function of inflation, because inflation, in case you don't know, is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. When there is more money, things cost more money because there's more dollars to go around per thing, right? So shopkeepers don't create inflation. Inflation is created by an increase in the money supply. And you can take that statement to the bank, which will maybe take your money, but you will find that it's not worth as much when you get to the bank. So yes, inflation is caused by an increase in the money supply. And we usually think of inflation as prices go up, but there are other effects of inflation that happen because of companies and individuals responding to inflation. And so one of those is that the quantity and the quality of the goods that people buy decreases. Things get worse, and you get less of the things that you were buying before. So one of the things you will notice, and you can go look at this right now at the grocery store, go get a half gallon of ice cream, and you'll notice it's not a half gallon. So you get a carton of ice cream, and it'll be like 1.5 quarts. At one point in time, there was a whole half gallon of ice cream in that carton. Why did they reduce the amount of ice cream that was in the carton? Were people throwing away ice cream because they couldn't just couldn't finish a half gallon of ice cream? No, it was because of inflation. There was a particular price point for ice cream, and let's say it was like $4.99 or something like that. Well, inflation goes up. Your options are to either increase the cost of the carton of ice cream, or to decrease something about the ice cream, make the ice cream cheaper. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is just to reduce the amount of ice cream that's in it a little bit. So you make it 1.9 quarts, and then it's 1.8 quarts, and it's 1.75 quarts. And before long, the amount of ice cream has shrunk to 1.5 quarts. There is 25% less ice cream in your carton than there was about 20 years ago. Now, why do they do this? Why don't they just increase the price? I mean, inflation happens, everything else goes up. And the reason is because consumers will respond to price increases in certain ways. So if you go to the grocery store and you're ready to get your weekly carton of ice cream for your family, and you stop and you go, why is it $6.99? I always paid $4.99 for my ice cream. You stop and you make a value judgment as to whether you're going to buy that ice cream or how frequently you're going to eat it, because you realize it costs more money. You probably don't have a whole lot of extra money because wages are sticky, whereas prices can float. So inflation always hits the wage earner much harder than the investor. Hits the wage earner hardest because his wages don't go up automatically when there's an increase in the money supply. So he makes a value judgment, decides not to buy the ice cream. You really want people to avoid making that decision. And in fact, I didn't make that decision, right? I kept buying the same coffee creamer week after week. What they did with the coffee creamer is, rather than decreasing the amount of coffee creamer in the bottle, and they may have done that too, I didn't pay that much attention to it. They decreased the quality of the item itself. Rather than giving you cream, which is expensive, they cut it with soybean oil, which is dirt cheap. So it's kind of like if you're getting a drug from a drug dealer and they tell you it's pure cocaine and they cut it with speed because speed is cheaper. This is something that happens a lot with street drugs. It's a good analogy because the point is that you don't want to increase the price a whole lot. You want to give as little product to your customer as possible. So you cut it with things that maybe feel the same but are not as expensive. They're much easier to acquire. And so soybean oil is basically the speed cutting. It's like cutting your creamer. So you're replacing the expensive ingredient of real cream with other less expensive ingredients that will attempt to mimic that, right? Nothing is creamier than cream, but cream is milk fat. Milk fat has different properties than soybean oil. So you add the soybean oil into it so that it continues to have fat and taste like fat and maybe feel like fat. Then you add the gelatin gum into it to thicken it up so it acts more like actual milk fat. And for a little bit, you can fool someone. You're like, I think this tastes like it did before, but it doesn't act that way. It doesn't froth up. It doesn't taste quite right. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth. It's a worse product than it was before. And so what they're banking on is, at least for that quarter, because everything tends to run on those quarterly profit reports, right? Consumers are going to continue buying the reduced quality product. They've cut the cost of the product by inserting soybean oil into it. And a couple of other ingredients, like buttermilk is not particularly expensive, right? Buttermilk's probably cheaper than cream. So you just, let's cut that out, put in some cheap buttermilk, and then we'll put in some soybean oil so that it maybe acts like milk fat. But what you've done is you've significantly reduced the quality of the product, hoping that the consumer will continue buying it. So you see this with lots of things. Candy bars are smaller than they used to be. People are surprised at this. This is one of the reasons that like candy bars are $1. They were 50 cents when I was a kid. According to inflation, they should be like $2. Well, they're smaller. The economy has also gotten a little bit better at producing things. This is another thing that hides inflation, is that over time, the economy gets more and more efficient at making all the stuff that it makes. So in a totally stable monetary environment, you'd see prices start to go down because the candy makers would get better and better at making candy at scale, rather than the prices kind of staying stable while the candy bar shrinks over time. So you notice this. Chip bags always have like a weird quantity of ounces in them. They used to be 1 pound. Ice cream used to be a half gallon. Now it's like some other weird quantity. They're cutting ice cream out of it so that they can hit a certain price point without alerting the consumer to the fact that the consumer is actually getting less. They're getting a lower quantity, or in this case, quality of items. The other things that you'll see it with too is like when you buy various kinds of goods, you will notice that the quality of the materials that are used decreases. You notice sometimes you pick something up, you're like, why does this have plastic on it? Like the same headphone model from 30 years ago has more plastic parts on it. Well, injected molded plastic is really cheap. It's not hard to make injected molded plastic. It's much cheaper than making a part out of copper or aluminum or steel. So you just cheapen the product a little bit by replacing some of the parts with plastic. Maybe you reduce the wire size of various things. I noticed this with cheap guitars, is they use like 24 gauge wire, which is just falls apart, So you reduce the quality of the things that you put in the items that you're selling in order to keep the price point the same. Maybe you cut on labor. Maybe there used to be some hand finishing involved with a product. You cut that out and you just have it come off the line with all of the burrs and the scratchy things still on the product. And like I said, you replace things with plastic. So one of the things that people, they just don't make them like they used to. There's a truth to that, because a lot of the products have gotten worse over time, not because the company is just greedy and evil, but because of inflation, is that they would have to keep charging more and more. Your plastic razor would be like, instead of $5 for a pack of blades, it'd be like 20 if it just kept making them at the same quality that it used to make them. It replaced most of the handles with plastic instead of steel, because that's cheaper. You do that kind of stuff over time with like across the board. Shampoo bottles have less shampoo in them than they used to have. And it's not like with a shampoo bottle, there's some kind of waste that you are getting rid of by shrinking the size of your shampoo bottle. You use the same amount of shampoo, you just are having to buy more bottles of it. That's what ends up happening. So one of the things happens is that you don't notice the prices going up when you're at the store. You don't notice inflation. You notice it at the end of the month when you've had to buy more shampoo, when you had to buy more things than you otherwise used to have to buy. Or you have to buy different things that are more expensive because the things that you were buying have cheapened out in order to keep the same price point. So it all comes down to inflation and all of these kind of signals that happen in the market, and an attempt to not alert consumers to the fact that things cost more. You'll decrease the quantity or quality so that they keep putting them in their shopping cart. It happens a lot at the grocery store. That's where you tend to notice it, because food has variable quantity. You can just take some out. You can switch out some ingredients, like with the coffee made stuff. And if it's a consumer grade electronic piece, you just put more plastic in it, take out more of the more expensive steel parts, and reduce the quality of the materials, or save on labor, get rid of any kind of finishing expense that you might have with the product. And that's how you continue offering the same price even though the quantity of money is going up. Anyway, so leave me your thoughts down below about switching out cream for soybean oil in order to try to fool the consumer and get them to continue buying your natural product. Leave me your thoughts and I will read them. I'll be glad to hear what they are. So thanks so much, guys, and I will see you next time. Newest book is called Demon Ex Machina. It is out right now. You can grab it. And if you read it and enjoyed it, I'm so glad. You could do me a big favor by leaving a review on Amazon. I appreciate it, and I will see you all next time.